I survived. Okay, it bounced over me.
We're going to be in Matthew 24 today.
Well, it went over the top of me and
Matthew 24. I can get my bunch to come in and get sit down. We'll be all right.
Terrible when kids don't mind.
I'm telling you. Well, it's the mom that doesn't matter. Most of the time. Last week we started in chapter 23, and we had, excuse me, at the first of chapter 24, and we were talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. But there's three different thoughts out there about this as I was studying through this week, and it was pretty prevalent. The first thought is that this chapter 24 is strictly all about the second coming of Christ. Nothing about the destruction of Jerusalem, which is totally wrong, because chapter 23 leads into exactly what happened when Jesus and his disciples leave out of the temple for the last time. They're going out, and he tells them, the disciples is telling Jesus about how magnificent the temple and all the buildings around the temple are, and all the gold and all the artwork and all that's on the temple. And he says how magnificent it is, and Jesus makes the comment that the temple will be destroyed, that not a single stone will be left unturned. So he's talking about the temple, the whole thing. Well, they get outside, and Jesus goes to the Mount of Olives, sits down, and the disciples come to him. And the question, if y'all remember, that was asked Jesus by his disciples was, and said, now he sat down on the Mount of Olives, and disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, and here's the three questions that we started answering last week. When will these things be? And what will be the sign of the coming and of the end of the age? What will be these? There's three questions that's asked there. And they just got through talking about the temple. And of course, we went over quite a bit last week about the different destructions. And if you will remember, if you'll look over in 24 verse 34, this is, surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things have taken place. And then the next statement after that leads us into the end of times, or when Christ returns. He finishes, it's going to shift over into a different thought. And Jesus does that by saying, heaven and earth will pass away, but by no means the word of my word will be, if I read it right, I've got my bookmark in the way, I'm sorry. But my words will by no means pass away. He's changing thoughts here. All right, the temple's going to pass away. We give all the signs and talked about it. And we're looking at the differences between the next section that we're going to read from 36 down through the end of the chapter, down through 51. It's going to change in what he's talking about. All right? It's, again, we talked about the type of writing, poetic, poetic type speech that Isaiah uses when he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem the first time. Same type of things he's talking about there. We talked about the difference when it talks about the stars falling and coming on a cloud and all that. That's terms that that society understood was of the destruction of a town or a city when God passed his judgment on them. He talked about the parable of the fig tree. How would you know when these things are going to happen? Well, when the tree starts blooming out and starts putting leaves on, that's going to happen in the summer, because it's not going to happen in the winter. And he said even that he hopes it never happens in the wintertime, because if you're trying to travel, because you're going to be, once the Romans are going to come and start destroying the temple, you won't have time to go back to your house and grab a bunch of provisions to go camping in the mountains, like he says, to run. He says they will kill you. And if you've read through any of Josephus's writings about how terrible it was, of the destruction of Jerusalem, on what they did, all the people they killed, they were having a civil war amongst themselves. They were killing each other before the Romans ever came inside. Everybody was wanting power, like always. But all that was going on at the same time, and they were killing each other inside the temple, in the temple yards, and then the Romans came in and just finished it off for them. They surrounded the whole entire city, and it talks about where the eagles gather and all the carcasses that are laying everywhere. The Romans are coming around. Of course, that was one of the symbols of the Roman armies was the eagle. And I think they even made a movie here a while back about somebody had stole one, and it was a pretty neat looking movie where they went to retrieve it because it's meant so much important to some of those Roman legions that they had. But I need someone, if they would, to read, starting in verse 36 and read down through 51. Let's read through it first, and we're going to go back and look at a few things. All right? Someone wants to do that.
But of that day and hour no one knows.
Yeah, starting in verse 36, chapter 24. Yeah. Yes, sir. You start in the right place.
But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah was, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. The two men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. Two men will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming. Know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season? Blessed is the servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Surely I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants and eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
All right. What is the difference between the first part of the chapter that we read last week, that we studied last week, and then this part of the chapter about signs? There are no signs. Exactly. There were signs that Jerusalem was about to be attacked, and we talked about all those signs last week. There were unusual things going on up until after Christ died, not long after Christ died. It was pretty calm in that whole region of Judea and Samaria and all those places over there. They weren't having any wars. They weren't having famines. They weren't having earthquakes, not like was about to come. But shortly after, even in secular writings, it talks about how many things, how many Roman, I think there was 3 or 4 Caesars that were killed for someone to take over the power of Rome. All kinds of chaos was happening. And that was one of those signs that we talked about last week was going to happen. Plus, it said no one even knows, not even the Son is going to know when he is coming back himself. The Father is the only one, not the angels will know. So that is one of them. And he also starts in 33, it says, of that day. That's a different time period. It's not the fall of Jerusalem, because how long did it take to take over Jerusalem? It was months. They was under siege, I think, for almost 6 months. They circled, they starved the people out. If y'all remember, they even talked about, Josephus talked about the women even eating their own children. They turned into cannibalism because they were starved out. And that's how you starve somebody out in those castles. You've seen the sieges that the English did and the French did on these castles. They lock themselves up in the castles, and then they would just surround it, not let any provisions in or out. And the conditions got worse and worse and worse. Finally, a lot of people died, and they just gave up. So that was kind of the same similar way they took over big fortified cities, and Jerusalem was a fortified city. So, but there is absolutely no signs are going to happen here. And then he got into the part where it talked about Paul also used in a couple of different times in 1 Thessalonians, he used let's go to, did I read it? Yeah, let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 right quick. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Someone read verse 15 for me. 1 Thessalonians 4, talking about his second coming, Christ's second coming, and starting in verse 15.
For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep.
All right. He was talking about that there was questioning him on they had misunderstanding about what was going to happen to those people that died before him. And he said they would all rise together when they got ready to go, but they're not going to go anywhere before that. And also Peter wrote in 2 Peter, someone turn for 2 Peter 3 and read verses 10 through 13 for me.
But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for the new heavens and the new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness.
Okay. Peter explains what's going to happen at the end of time when Christ comes back. Why did he put Noah and the people of that day? Why would he compare that to what was going to happen here?
They just acted like nothing was ever changed the whole time he built the ark, and it wasn't until after the Lord closed Noah and his family in, and the rain started coming, then they realized.
Right. They thought everything, and the same thing is going to be happening when Christ comes back too. You're just going to be going along, and it could happen any minute, or it could happen in years. We just don't know. We're going to talk about a time period here in just a few minutes.
What I don't understand is how people can read that and then flip on over to Revelations and think we're going to live 1,000 years on this earth.
Somebody's helping them misunderstand that, aren't they?
The first verse of John tells you these are things to be seen.
Right. I don't either. I don't have an answer for that. Anyone?
I think it's just like with anything else. If you already read something with a thought in your head, you can see it.
Right.
You know, if you're reading with that presupposition that there is going to be 1,000-year reign, you can find things in there that might make sense for that. But if you read with an open heart, open mind, you're not going to find that. That's really the only way that I can.
The people were just going along their everyday business, wasn't it? All of a sudden, how did the floods work back then? Does anyone know what happened? You remember in Genesis when it tells us about the floods? How did the waters come? We always thought, when I was growing up, I always thought it just started raining and just raining and raining and raining. That's not what happened, was it? Everything opened up. It come out of the ground, and it was in like a flash flood instantly. It just came out of the ground, and also it rained on top of it. That I don't know what all waters the Lord released, but it was not it took days and days and days to build up all the water. He opened it, and it happened almost instantly. Those people were just wiped out and washed away real quick.
I'll say this, I'm not 100% sure I'm right, but this is what I think I read in the Bible. If I'm wrong, correct me, or somebody correct me.
Oh, we're good at that.
You know, back then, Noah was preaching to those people.
The whole time.
Yes. And that was for lots and lots of years. I forget now exactly, but that don't matter. What matters is, if I understand it right, it had not been raining it was just a heavy dew.
I've heard that too. I don't know. I can't say that, yeah, it had never rained before then.
But I can see where they had to have some faith to believe that the flood is, the flood's coming so much that it was gonna float a ship or a boat that Noah was making.
Right.
They didn't have no faith. And we also know that God looked at them and saw that they was only evil.
That's what I want to go back to. Let's go back to Genesis 6 right quick. Come back to Genesis 6. Why would God want to destroy them anyway? He tells us in Genesis 6. Starting in verse, somebody wants to read 5 through 8 for me. Genesis 6, 5 through 8.
God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them, that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
Okay. What will happen to the wicked on the day that Christ comes back? Will the same thing happen to the wicked today that happened to the wicked back then? He will take those wicked people. He's got a place prepared for those already. We're told that. And yeah, there's that second chance deal that Loretta was talking about. Where do they come up? And we know where they get some of those ideas, because they just pull this verse out, and leave the whole context alone. They just, and that's the biggest problem of all of it. They don't stay in context what you're talking about. But we will not have a second opportunity. Did you read? You read in Peter where it talked about what will happen when Christ comes back. You won't have this time period to get things done right, to go back and all that left behind stuff. You know, the premillennialism. I'll get it out in a minute. The rapture and all that kind of stuff that they're coming to. They use part of these verses, especially the next part where it says, the one man will be working in the fields and taken, and one left. Two women will be at the mill grinding, and one taken and one left. What did he just get through talking about right before that? The sentence before that, he talked about what? The flood coming. What happened to those people that are out in the fields? They floated away. Who was the ones that were saved? The ones on the ark. That was the only ones that were saved, wasn't it? That's one of those things that they like to pull from. That, hey, this one's going to be taken and this is going to be left. Which one had you rather be? The one taken or the one left? Definitely the one taken, right? I wouldn't want to be left here to hopefully get a second chance, because there's not going to be a second chance. Yes, ma'am.
Talking about Gehenna and paradise, that when you die,
Right.
You
In the different
I've
places.
been taught of the two waiting places that you are at.
Right.
If you're saved, if God knows you're saved, you
Right.
go to the good place. If not, you go to the bad. So in a sense, you're already judged because of what waiting place you're in. Not that, because God's going to still bring you in face of Him to face you with what you've done.
When we go back to the rich man and Lazarus, it gives us a little bit of insight on one guy was already being tormented some, and Lazarus wasn't. He was in arrest. Again, we don't know a whole lot about that. He gives us just a very little bit of insight. Anyone have any ideas on that? I know Zach's studied a lot of that. He's taught some classes on the two different places. So, do you want to comment on that?
As far as just Sheol and waiting place?
Yeah.
So, the Hebrew understanding was that Sheol was the waiting place of the dead. And when you get to the story of the rich man Lazarus, where you have a separation between the wicked and the good,
The gulf in there.
there's a chasm in between. And their train of thought was those who were believers in the wickedness that was evil were condemned to that side of Sheol, and those that were believers had believing loyalty in the one true God just a waiting place.
We know it's a waiting place, and God says, I've got a waiting place prepared for you, and then we'll learn that later. Let me get David, then I'll get you, Loretta. David?
Well, the deal is, right, we will be separated, it sounds to me like, the minute we die, we're over here or there, but we're still gonna meet God, because we're still gonna be judged, maybe not so much judged because we need to know why we were there. You know, because they say, well, when did we do this, Lord, when did we do that? So there is some confrontation or something with the judgment day.
Right.
It's not thrown over here or there.
Yep.
You know, there's gonna be a face-to-face to God.
Right.
Judgment's gonna be, everybody's gonna hear it.
Sure.
Whereas this is kind of you're there.
This is the building, because we've got people that's already died thousands of years ago, and we've got people yet to be born that is going to be coming. So it's going to be a time God's got to put them somewhere, and that's what He has made for everyone for a waiting place.
Back to the men and women that were, like one was taken on the left. One's not physically going to be left here.
No.
But that's where people take that out of context and use that for the criminal cases.
Right. Yep. This is one of the places they pull. It really is.
I think what it's saying is, because in Revelation it says we will raise up and watch the world burn.
Right.
And we will judge those that are wicked and the wicked angels and watch the world burn. Those that are left are going to be burned up and withered away like chaff.
Right.
And those that are raised to watch the world burn will be given a new heaven and a new earth like it was originally in the Garden of Eden. And we know when Christ died, he told the people on the cross, today you will be with me in paradise.
Right.
Which paradise means garden.
Right.
Just like the Garden of Eden. We know for the 3 days that he was in the tomb, he went and talked to these spirits that were in the holding place, the waiting place. And he proclaimed his victory over the ones that were on the evil side and basically went to paradise, or Abraham's bosom, and said, I'm proclaiming my kingdom, I proclaim the victory, and when I come again, everything will be judged.
Right.
He didn't go to God's right hand until he ascended after he was
Sure.
resurrected.
Yeah.
So he went to that waiting place.
So the ones here left behind is not a good thing. Not at all. But yet, those people that believe those things, that the 1,000-year reign and all that kind of stuff, they got it totally backwards of what's going on here. Okay? They just do. And then he goes on to talk about talks more about the hour not even knowing. And he talks about the master's house. He said, if you left your house unguarded, or if you knew a thief was coming, that means if we knew God was given a certain day, how many people in history have said the Lord is coming on this day? And even in our generations, we've seen it happen over and over and over. You've even had people, who was it, in Jonestown, what was that name, John? What was that guy that had all those people commit suicide because they know the Lord was coming that day so they could take them, which I don't know if the Lord would have taken them the way he wanted to, but he wanted their belongings and their money. We've had, there was a place in California that had people with caves that, every generation's had them, right? And how many, there was a couple of years ago, there was one guy said it was coming and it didn't. He said, who was the guy that's in prison for down in San Angelo? I forgot his name. Had the compounds down there that had all the young wives, all the little girls that was wives. No, it wasn't Koresh, but Koresh was kind of, but I can't remember the other guy. Yeah, he had even said when he was living in Utah that God was coming a certain day and he didn't come. What was his excuse? You people aren't spiritual enough for God to come back for you. See, they always have an excuse when it doesn't happen. But he said no one will know, not even Jesus himself will know. Yes, sir.
Well, when you go back to Noah, God chose him because he was a just man and he was righteous.
Right.
And he told him what to do. And he had already made a his mind what, God made up his mind what he was gonna do. But once he shut them up in that ark, that was it for
Right.
everybody else. You know, they didn't have another chance. And so then when the end comes for us, that's gonna be it for those people that thought tomorrow is another day. And they just, I think they want to believe that there's gonna be another chance. One more chance.
You know, those that believe in premillennialism is not the only ones. We have a group out there also that once you go and die, that you can actually be prayed out of the bad place into the good place, right? But it usually comes with what? If you pay us a certain amount of money, we'll make sure that they're prayed out of that place into the new place. So.
Yes, but if Jesus came back today, proclaim, you know, you've got one more day, to chance. You know, people, they wouldn't.
Some would and some wouldn't. That's why he added this deal about the thief coming.
People that wouldn't even win, even
Yeah.
if they saw Jesus.
Right. Because we have things that will break into a place even though they know that they're going to get caught or know there's a chance of them being hurt. They'll still do it, right? They'll take that chance. But why he talked about the thief here, if you know, yeah, you're going to change everything and everybody will just about be saved then. Jesus says, no, that's not the way it is. That's not the way it's going to be. All right, let's continue on. In verse 45, he talks about this the servant that this guy leaves, and he goes on a journey. Okay, and he's going to come back later, but he comes back a day the servant doesn't know. He says in verse, let me get the right verse. A master is delayed in his coming. Okay. There's two places that I found in Scripture that talks about God delaying his coming. That what was the idea of the apostles even and in of the first century church? How quick did they think Christ was coming back? In their lifetime, coming back very, very soon, right? But Jesus even put here, said, my master went on a journey. Do you do a journey just overnight? A journey is a long period of time. Go to, let's see, where's the other one I looked up? Luke 20. Turn to Luke 20. Starting in verse 9. He talks about the vine dresser, right? Here. How does somebody start and just read verse 9 for me? Luke 20, verse 9.
Then he began to tell the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard, leased it to vine dressers, and went into a far country.
All right. Who's he talking about? Whose property is this? It's God's property. And then what did he do? He leased it. But now, what happened after he leased it though? He left and went into a far country. All right. That's just not overnight. These are two places I think Scripture gives us an idea. God wasn't coming back during that lifetime. And it could be another 1,000 years before he comes back. He never promised he'd be back tomorrow. Never promised he'd be back next year. I think these are two places that it talks about God has got a plan, but it's going to be over time. How long did he work with the children of Israel? Thousands of years, didn't he? He just didn't come back and send the Messiah back just real recently after he gave them all the laws, set up all their lands. He took his time before Christ. Things have to be right to get there. Now, everything has pretty much been done, but it's on his own timetable. And these are two places I think that Jesus said use this parable on purpose. It will not be tomorrow. It will not be next week. God has his own time period, and it will be a while. That's my personal opinion. I don't know. So, but there's two places where it said that the master went on a journey, was gone for a while. So God was going to be gone for a while, or not gone, but it was going to be before he came back and took possession of what was his again. It was going to be a little while.
It may have something to do with the Great Commission too, because I don't think the Great Commission has been completely fulfilled. Once all the earth knows who Christ is,
Right.
then the Great Commission is complete.
Well, there was, at that time, we know that it was, because even Paul says it, that the word has been spread to the whole entire world during his lifetime. So, again, but we know there's lots of places out there that have not heard it today. Lots of people have not heard it today. So, but at that time, the whole world had heard it, because Paul said he had heard it. So, yeah.
Well, Johnny, I'll say this. Whether it comes tomorrow or 1,000 years from now, we all know when we die, that's it. There's no changing which
For
way
us,
we going.
right.
So that's what is really important to us.
Right.
Is we gotta live so when we die.
Because that's why Paul was talking to the Thessalonians. They thought it was going to be very soon, and they were worried about what happened to us if we're still alive today. Well, God's got a plan for that too. And they will get to see him come in his glory. They will get to see him where those that have already gone on, it won't matter to them anymore.
Right.
But those that are staying alive. And at the end, it's pretty gruesome what the master does. What does he say is going to happen to him, Cut him in two. Cut him in half. And then what would he also say is during that time period, what was going to happen? He's going to label him with the who? The hypocrites. Why was that word term so important that he used right here? What had we learned a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and Sadducees? What did he kept calling them? Why did he call it? What's a hypocrite?
Saying one thing and doing another.
Somebody that was saying one thing and doing another. Isn't that, unfortunately, most of our lives? We say one thing and then we turn around and do something we know we're not supposed to be doing. We ourselves are hypocritical. And we battle that. We struggle with that. We try and do better with that. But we don't want the rest of the world to know, hey, I'm a hypocrite, so I'm going to hide it. I'm not going to let, now, the Sadducees and Pharisees were out in the open with their hypocrisy. That easy. And we've got, of course, we see our government is so hypocritical in what's going on around us today. It seems to have gotten worse in the last, 4, 5, 6 years. It's just unbelievable. But as a Christian, you don't want people to think of you as a hypocrite. Isn't that what we're told that drives most people away from the church? That we say we are one way, but yet our actions are different, totally different. What they see is, where they see is at, what they hear is saying, things like that. We've got to be extremely careful on what we do. And he's telling them here, I'm going to label you as a hypocrite. I'm gonna even, your punishment is I'm gonna cut you in half. Well, that destroys your body, destroys your life. And he says, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And this same term is used also in another place when it talks describing Hades or hell that people are going to go to, where there's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This is not the last time it's going to be used. Yes, sir.
I had a preacher once when I was down in Freeport, Texas for a while, named Cecil Heffelfinger. Unusual
Real name?
Great preacher. Loved him. And he had another name for those hypocrites. And he used it quite often, Johnny. He said, false Christians.
Yeah.
I've heard him say it 10 times if I heard him say it once. But that's what rings my bell.
Yep, false Christian. You're right.
Hypocritical.
Yep. And that's the one thing that I don't like. Does any of us like hypocrites?
No.
That says one thing and does something else, it just turns you off. Don't tell me how to be and how you're supposed to be, and then I turn around and see you doing totally opposite. It's very difficult. And again, we talked about sometimes our children saw us being hypocrites as we grew up. That's some things we had to learn to be different. We would say one thing and then turn around and do something else. And the hurt on their faces that you could see, those children, that's not what you said you were like. That's not what you said you would do. And the same hurt goes that God has on his face and that Christ would have on his if he saw us saying one thing and doing right the opposite. That's something we have to guard against. But he is telling them here, this is two different events. The differences in the two, all right? I've got a few of these written down. The destruction of Jerusalem, the time is identifiable. They knew exactly when it was going to happen, right? But the time of the world, end of the world, the time is unknown. The time of the destruction of Jerusalem, it will occur in this generation, because we read that. Jesus himself said it. You will see in this generation, you'll witness all these things that he talked about early in the first part of the chapter 24. And he talks about here in the second part of it, that it will happen on that day. It's going to be a finite amount of time. It's going to happen immediately. It's going to happen then. The destruction of Jerusalem, there are going to be events prior that are going to be unusual that was going on in that part of the country. If you read, again, secular history will tell you all the weird things that started happening during that 70-year time period, or about 40-year time period after Christ had passed. For the end of the world, the events prior to it will be typical, because we just read it. It said everybody will go on like their merry way, everything they were doing every day, without even knowing it's going to happen. The destruction of Jerusalem, there would be advanced warnings. Example, it was the fig tree. You knew some things that were going to happen in advance. There will be no warning. It's going to be like a thief in the night when Christ comes back. The destruction of Jerusalem, the judgment will be local. It's about one nation, and that was the destruction of the children of Israel against that country. God's judgment is going to be universal. The whole entire world is going to be involved in it. The destruction of Jerusalem, specific signs of the coming judgment will be seen. No advanced signs at the end of the time, end of the age that Christ is coming back. Yes?
Look at the things there in 2 Peter 3, verse 12.
You'll have to read it back with me again.
He's looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God.
What did Paul say about?
How do we hasten the day of God's coming?
We can't hasten it, but we wish for it to come faster, don't we?
Earnestly desiring.
Yeah, that's another term. Yeah, earnestly desiring. I like that. We desire. Paul did so much. He wanted to go then, but he said that, hey, I know that God's got other plans for me.
That's the translation say it. Hastening in there.
You want to have a different translation in John 2 Peter 3:12. 2 Peter 3:12. I've got the King James, or New King James. Looking for and hastening. Looking forward to it. We all look forward to the day of Christ coming, right?
Amen.
We want out of this world and everything that's going on.
The Strong's definition talks about it being to urge diligently, to await eagerly.
Yeah.
But my only point